Alright guys, the first piece of work we're going to do this morning before we try to take the engine off the stand is to put the flywheel back on. So we've got the red Loctite ready for the bolts. Nothing too hard about putting the flywheel back on, just make sure that your pin is aligned and make sure that you have your pilot bush in the back of your flywheel. If you have a later TR6 flywheel, make sure your pilot bush is pressed in there. And that's it. So we'll go ahead, bring it back once we torque the bolts down. Alright guys, the flywheel is now torqued down to, well, the spec reads 50 to 75 foot-pounds, so I've done it at 70 foot-pounds. We had to put a little bit of a angle iron in here to engage the teeth on the flywheel to keep it from spinning so we could torque it. So we just bolted up this piece of angle here, and that worked out perfectly. So probably just clean that face up with a little bit of brake cleaner, and then we'll move on to the next part. Alright, nothing is ever easy sometimes. Anyway, we've rescued the dowels from the other flywheel, but I'm just noticing that the fasteners are different, much smaller actually on this later TR6 flywheel than the earlier flywheel. Now I believe this guy has actually made some mods to this and drilled these out, because I remember taking these out of the car when I was disassembling the car, and they were actually hex-headed bolts or set screws that were in here, so I knew they weren't factory for the car. So I think he's enlarged this opening or in this thread for the flywheel or the clutch attachment bolts. So now we're gonna have to find some fasteners, and anyway, we'll have to look it up in the book and see what they're supposed to be and see if we even have those. Alright guys, we're moving to the front of the engine now, and we're going to install the crankshaft pulley and the crank snout to the crankshaft. So we're going to make sure that it locates on the key on here on the crank, and going to make sure it sits snug and flat against the spacer here at the back, and then we'll install the pulley and the bolt. And I got to find a torque value for that bolt. I know it's on there pretty tight, but having a quick glance in the manual, I don't see the torque value, so I have to do a bit more research on that. Alright, we'll go ahead and we'll fit that. Alright guys, the crank snout and the crank pulley are now installed. And just for anybody that's interested, you probably don't have this in your normal socket set. It's an 1 1/8" socket to fit that crank pulley bolt. So you may need that if you are doing a similar job on your car. Anyway, okay, so let's move on to something else. So getting to a point where I need to get this engine off the stand. Maybe we'll unwrap the transmission. We'll make a little bit of space in the garage here to be able to mate the trans and the engine at some point. And again, I've got to get this off the stand as well onto probably a rolling base. So it's getting to that point where I've got to set up the engine hoist to do that. I think I'm going to use my lifting straps versus a chain or a cable to lift the motor, but we'll figure it out and we'll bring you back. Alright, a little change of plans on the use of the engine lifting strap, since my neighbor Les still has mine tucked away at his shop somewhere. So anyway, we've got the tilt lift here hooked up to a couple of the head studs. That will suffice. So we're just about getting ready to lift it off. So if you want to follow along, be my guest. Cross your fingers, hope nothing goes well. I did almost drop one of these engines one time, and I was lucky that I had grade 8 bolts attached. It wasn't a side mount that I almost dropped. It was a regular end mount, and the actual grade 8 bolts stretched, and I was lucky that I was able to rescue it before the bolts completely broke. So I'm always a little cautious when lifting these. I think it'd be fairly simple, but stuff happens, as they say. I think I'm just going to square up my tilt lift. One cable that's longer than the other. I'm not sure about the balance on the engine, so square this up a little bit. Hard larger ratchet. Probably a little better there. We just have a little bit of pressure on the, probably a little too much. I don't want to be too difficult to get the bolts out of the engine mounts. All right, I'm going to turn you off for now, and I'll come back when we get those bolts off, and because I'm just going to be blocking the view anyway, so I'll get those bolts off, and then we'll come back and ready for liftoff. Alright guys, no drama. There she is, free from the engine stand. So what we'll do is, I think while it's suspended, I'm going to put it down a little bit closer to the floor, but we'll move the engine stand out. We'll attach the other side mount, motor mount, and then I've got this dolly here that will move under it. I've got a couple blocks of wood ready just for underneath the front of the block, underneath the oil pan, just to keep it suspended. But I'll show you that in a couple of minutes once I do some rearranging in here, and we'll get it closer to the ground. Alright, we're going to lower it down onto the dolly. I've got to clean up the hardware for the left-hand side, since the studs that were in there were a little longer because they were going through the engine plate, so I've got to make them a little bit shorter because they're not able to go into the block far enough. So all I'm going to do is lower this down. The oil pan goes into the hole, and we'll lower it slowly, and like I said, we'll just need to block up the front under the oil pan. It took out the engine oil temperature sender. I thought it might get broken off in this process, so oil pan sitting down there. It's on the rear of the the only problem is I'll need a little bit shorter piece of wood for the nose of that. So let me see if I can find a short piece of 2x4. I'm just going to move it back a little bit now. Alright, I'm happy with that. It's on the rear engine plate and obviously blocked under the oil pan at the front, so nice and safe there. We'll be able to get the trans on and get to everything that we need to. Alright, next steps. Alright guys, the other motor mount is now installed, so we're good to put this back on the car now. I did spend a few minutes cleaning up the old 50-year-old plus plastic fan. It actually came up not too bad. Some guys will actually paint these. I think Tim was telling me that Tim's restoring a 250 with his brother. I think they used plastic paint. I think it was called butternut squash or I don't know, summer squash or something like that, but it's a plastic paint that closely resembles this color. The other fan that I actually dug out of the shed the other day is significantly darker yellow, so not sure if they're just aged differently or there was a different casting date or whatever. But anyway, I'm going to go with this one. The lighter yellow one's a little bit better shape, so we'll go with that one after we clean it up a little bit more. We just gave it a quick cleaning. We'll probably take it inside and give it a scrub under the sink and try to get some of the dirt out of the center of it and out of the back side. Alright, that's it for now, guys. We'll be back in a bit. Alright guys, we've brought the clutch out. We're getting ready to install that. The only problem is, as I mentioned, the flywheel has different fasteners than the earlier flywheel that doesn't fit on this car. So I've just looked it up, and the factory fasteners are 5/16 by 3/4 inch, but they are UNC, so they're coarse thread, which is kind of unusual for a Triumph. Mostly everything is fine thread. So I'm now on a search for 5/16 3/4 inch coarse thread set screws. So let me see if I can find some. Well, lucky I'm a bit of a pack rat. I actually found some new 5/16 3/4 inch coarse thread, so we'll go ahead and we'll use those. I've got 6 of them. Actually, I've got 7, so I think I need 6. So new lock washers, and we should be able to install the clutch on the flywheel. So let's go to town. Alright guys, I thought I'd take a quick video of just replacing the clutch for anybody that's not done it before. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean the flywheel off with a little bit of brake cleaner and some paper towel, since this will be the last opportunity to do that. So we're just going to do that while we can. Get any grease or fingerprints off there, especially if you've got a newly machined flywheel like this one. There's always bound to be a little bit of dirt on it. I have cleaned it previously, but we'll clean it once more just to make sure it's completely clean. Alright, so first step is to take your driven plate. So you'll notice that on your plate, your friction plate, that there's a marking that says flywheel side, or it'll say this side to engine, something like that. This one actually says flywheel side. Don't know if you can be able to read that in the camera or not, but it does actually say flywheel side. So what you want to do is you want to take your dummy input shaft, so this little guy here, and you're going to make sure you obviously have it to the flywheel. Make sure your hands are clean as well. I should probably mention that. So take your dummy, and you're just going to want to put that driven plate in through the pilot bushing, and it'll just hold that in place. Okay? Just check one more time. We've got that in correctly. Flywheel side, yes we do. We'll stick it back in. So that will center that. Alright, next step is to grab your pressure plate. You can also give this a quick cleanup with paper towels as well, because there might be some manufacturing goop on it. So I'm just cleaning the face of the pressure plate as well with some brake clean and paper towel, just to get any oils off of there. Alright, so this needs to be aligned. You'll notice that there's 3 dowels on the flywheel. So this needs to be aligned with the 3 dowels. And a little bit more than that. There's actually a number of different ways this can be fitted, but you got to make sure that you align the dowels with the actual holes that are there for the actual screws. Okay guys, the clutch is now on the locating dowels. So what we'll do is we'll start putting our fasteners in. We'll go around the circumference and just tighten each loosely to draw it completely in, and then we will torque it down according to the spec. It's 16 to 20 foot-pounds. I'll bring you back when we get to that point. Alright guys, final step, 20 foot-pounds. Go around once more. And that's it. Remove the dummy. And you are done. That's it. Clutch installation complete. Alright guys, just coming up to 20 to 6, and this will be the last little job I do for the evening. And I've just got the trans mount. So this is the transmission mount to the engine block. Studs and bolts, basically. Going to get them cleaned up. We're going to soak them in some Varsol overnight, and then this will be one of the jobs that we have to do tomorrow. So we'll figure out the rest of the hardware. I think they're supposed to be all nylock nuts. You've got a mixture here of non-nylock and nylock. Just remember that not only does this fasten the transmission, it also fastens the clutch slave cylinder, and it also, one of the studs actually attaches the water pipe, holds the water pipe solid. So just remember that. You might want to figure that out before you put the bolt in, because you're going to have to undo it. If you're going to put this water pipe on afterwards on the side of the block, you're going to have to undo that transmission mount. So you may want to leave that one empty if you can. I'm going to put the clutch slave bracket on when I do this, so that should be okay. But this water pipe is probably a little bit later on, so just keep that in mind. Alright guys, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching, and thanks for commenting and subscribing. And we'll see you tomorrow. We will see you tomorrow.